I can't believe we're already at our final interview, and I am super excited to announce this one because I have just become one of their activators. And actually today is the first day of voting for New Zealand activators to select the entrepreneurs we would like our investment to go to. Jessy Wang is SheEO's Director of Activator Growth. She is responsible for growing the community from 500 Canadian women and women activators to more than 7,000 across 5 countries. SheEO is a global community of radically generous women, transforming the way we fund, support, and celebrate women entrepreneurs who are creating a better world. Since launching in 2015, SheEO activators have collectively loaned out $7 million to support 100 plus women-led ventures. Welcome, Jessy. Last, but by all means not least, how are you?
Thank you so much. I'm doing well. Happy to be here with you all.
We have an amazing community still here 2.5 hours later. So thanks for bearing with us, everyone. It's been fun. For those in the audience that aren't familiar with SheEO, do you want to just spend a couple of minutes giving a brief overview of who you guys are and what you do?
Sure, and thank you so much for the lovely intro. I also just shared the link to our website in the chat as well if you'd like to explore. So as Marika mentioned, we are a global community transforming how we fund, support, and celebrate women and non-binary entrepreneurs. And specifically, our focus is on ventures, entrepreneurs who are working on the world's to-do list. So creating social and environmental impact through their businesses. And the reason why we got started, so we founded in 2015, is because of the inequitable access for women to access money and capital to grow their businesses and to grow their incredible innovations. So at the time in 2015, the stat was that about 2.2% of venture capital goes to women. And in the last year in COVID, this number has actually dropped to a 3-year low. So through COVID, it's exacerbating existing social inequalities. And so this number hasn't really changed for decades. And so we believe that the only way that we can start getting capital into the hands of women and non-binary entrepreneurs is if we start stepping up to support and fund one another. So how our model works is that every year, hundreds and now thousands of activators, so any radically generous woman or non-binary person can become an activator. And thank you, Marika, who's one of our most recent Kiwi activators. Each activator contributes $92 per month or $1,100 per year. We pool that money together and then we loan it out in the form of interest-free loans to ventures, so to entrepreneurs that activators like myself and like Marika get to go online and review. So Marika just mentioned that the second round of voting in Australia and New Zealand just launched today, so it's been a big day. But every year there are hundreds who apply, and then activators review and help decide who the ventures will be through 2 rounds of online voting. And so then those ventures receive the capital, interest-free loan. They also receive coaching through the program, as well as access to now a global community of activators. And activators are radically generous and can support as early customers, advisors, investors, experts, etc., to help the ventures grow. So we started in 2015, and to date, we have funded and supported over 100 ventures. We're in Canada, the US, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK. And we have a 95% repayment rate on the loans. And so much of the support and the impact that's been created is because of our radical generosity collectively as a community.
Yeah, and I love that value of radical generosity. Do you want to just spend a little bit of time talking about, how that shows up across your community?
Sure. So radical generosity has always been really core, not only to our brand, but really to our community. And it means different things to different people. But I'll share 2 interpretations or ways that I see it in the community. So the first is that when you activate, activating I see as an act of radical generosity. So your $92 per month or your $1,100, you don't get that money back, because what happens is that when you give that act of radical generosity, your money goes towards a perpetual fund. So it's loaned out to support impact-driven businesses, and then it's paid back and it's loaned out again to support more and more ventures over time. So by creating this perpetual fund for women and non-binary entrepreneurs, that is a true act of radical generosity. And the second is that we practice radical generosity every day in the SheEO community. And often the way that that takes shape is through practicing what we call asks and gives. So it's pretty simple. Asks is sharing what we need help with, and gives is offering what support we can to each other. And it's written right within our credo. So our credo starts off by saying, at SheEO, we practice radical generosity, which we believe is core to creating a new model and a better world. So to me, radical generosity is a way of being. It's a way of showing up for each other. And when we give and we move from a transaction to a relationship, when we give without expecting anything in return, we really, at least I found in my personal experience, you get so much more out of the experience. And oftentimes activators globally are really surprised and delighted by just how much they get back when they start with an act of radical generosity. And so one of the ways that we practice this to get a little bit more tangible is that we have weekly calls, and we have virtual events. And oftentimes on these calls and events, just like on today's Zoom, we go out into breakout groups, and then we go around the circle and we share what it is that we need help with and what support we can offer to each other. And one story that I like to share that really illustrates the power of radical generosity happened right after COVID hit. So in late March 2020. So one of our, I would say it was like 4 days after the global pandemic had been declared officially. And so, as you can imagine, and I'm sure many of you probably went through the same experience, a lot of ventures in our community were quickly needing to figure out how to pivot and what to do amidst a lot of chaos and uncertainty. So knowing this, it was, I believe the date was March 18th, we quickly put together a global all venture call. So we had 40 ventures from across the global community on that call. And we went through each venture doing red, green, yellow, a quick triage system. Are you in danger? Is your business at risk? Are you cautiously proceeding? Are you okay for now? And when it was one of our ventures' turn, Hannah, who's one of our Canadian ventures, when it was her turn to speak, she was in tears because her company is a social enterprise that employs people experiencing homelessness. And what they do is they're a linen service for the hospitality industry. So she had just come off this high. She was presenting on stage at the Global Summit for SheEO, talking about how she was expanding her business, seeking her next raise of fundraising. And literally within 24 hours, when COVID hit, she lost 95% of her revenues because, as we all know, hospitality industry very hard hit. And so when it was her turn to speak on this call, she was in tears because she wasn't sure how she would pay her next payroll. And it's especially challenging when the people that you're employing are experiencing homelessness. She didn't know how she would be able to do that. And so one of the other ventures on the call, B, asked Hannah, how much is your next payroll? And when she shared the amount, she said that money is on its way to your bank account right now. And so this is a really, really beautiful story. It got picked up by Oprah, sharing the spirit of radical generosity to just illustrate what can happen, what's possible when we ask for what we what we need help with, and when we show up to support each other in the spirit of radical generosity.
Yeah, I mean, I joined because I wanted to support women ventures. I had no idea that there were all of these other benefits that came with being an activator. So, so you talked a little bit about your credo, which is on your website, and then you have, I think you have like 10 core values, which is a lot, and a very deep explanation into each of those. How did SheEO come to form those values? What was the process like?
Yeah, so it's an interesting process because we wrote our credo in the first year, so in 2015, and it's kind of wild just how deeply it still resonates to this day. I would say we have dramatically changed almost everything else about SheEO, rebranded, expanded, evolved to include non-binary entrepreneurs, evolved to really talk about Indigenous wisdom and racial justice. But the credo has always remained as is, which is kind of unique. But the values and practices, so Marika is referring on our website, you can find our 10 values and practices. And for each, we have a pretty thorough essay written about them. And the essays are quite unique because they pull in a lot of sociological concepts. We reference nature, Indigenous wisdom, a lot of different interdisciplinary concepts to help illustrate what the values and practices are. And those actually were written last year, 2020 is when we developed them. Thank you for the link, Callie. And so we wrote them in collaboration with one of our activators, Denise Hearn, who is a writer and an author and an economist, so was able to pull in a lot of different concepts to help us really kind of explain those concepts. And so then we revised them. Our whole team gave feedback. We shared them with activators to see if this resonated with the greater community. And so that's essentially the process of how they came to be. So credo first, and the values and practices, at least those essays were actually a more recent development.
Got it. Okay. So we've already spoken about radical generosity, which is one of those 10, right? What's another one of your favorites? Maybe we can just have a quick chat about one that resonates the most with you.
Sure. So yeah, this was a hard question because really a lot of them resonate with me. And I think a lot of them, you know, we see them being embodied in the way that our community comes together and how we show up to support each other. But one that I would say I think is really true in my day-to-day is this value and this concept of emergence. So we often talk since 2015 that at SheEO, we follow the energy. And so that's like an interesting example of the iteration. Since the beginning, we've been saying follow the energy, but only, you know, in 2020 were we able to evolve that into the value of emergence and kind of fleshing that out a little bit more. And so I pulled a little excerpt from what the essay on emergence says that we created. So here's an example. We always try to adapt to new information, evolve our strategy in real time, and stay agile. Like a flock of starlings, we adapt using information from those within the network to determine our flight path. And I feel like this emergence and this following the energy is really something that sets SheEO apart. And so just to give you a few examples of how this how I practice this and how our team and community practices this day to day is that we are always paying really, really close attention and listening very deeply to what community members are saying, what activators and ventures are saying, and what they're not saying when they're participating and when they're not participating, and really trying to notice what's resonating with folks. But beyond that noticing, we also ask for feedback at every single touch point. So every time an activator joins a weekly call, joins an event, a welcome call, participates in voting, like literally any engagement touch point, we ask for feedback. And then every single response goes through an automation, feeds into a Slack channel that our full team has access to. And so every day as I'm doing work, I'm seeing in real time the feedback that is coming through from activators and ventures. And I think one of our strengths as a team, it's a muscle that we've built, is that we respond and iterate very quickly in real time to what folks are saying. So for example, you know, this happened today on our 11 a.m. call. We noticed that we could have used some framing for an activity. So at the 1 p.m. call with our Canadian activators, we added that in. So always trying to iterate and improve based on what folks are saying in the community. And so an example of how this emerged recently was that, or it starts off a couple of months ago. So in July, we hosted a special call. So it was a 5-year celebration, and we were celebrating as a community because our very first venture cohort from 2015 paid back their loans 100% without missing a single payment. So a massive milestone for our communities. So we hosted a big celebration, and we noticed, we're always paying attention to who's coming on the calls, what are people saying. And we noticed that that call in particular brought out tons of activators that we don't typically see week to week. They're not the ones who are posting on Slack or are posting on the Ask and Give platform. And so it led us to wonder, maybe there's a segment, a group of activators within the community, because our network is very diverse. Maybe there's a group that would like to participate in more of that style of programming where it's a bit more passive. You can come on and listen to the stories and the updates without needing necessarily to, ask for help, to go into a one-on-one pair, to put your hand up and be more vocally participating. So with that thought, we tried a new format last week, which is that we did a 30-minute quick update call to share impact stories and updates with our founder, Vicki Saunders. And so we experimented, and it was really successful. So lots of activators who don't typically show up joined that call, which for me, I'm always looking at activator engagement, participation, what's resonating with folks. And, I got an email right after the call from a New Zealand activator who had activated a year ago. And this was the first call that she went to. So that was like a real sign of success. And one of the comments on the call that I thought was very interesting, one of the Australian activators said during the call, I feel like SheEO has this ability to identify what it is that I want before I even realize it. And Marika was on the call too, and a lot of activators in the chat were like, I feel the same way. But really, it's not because we can predict the future, but it's really just because we're listening very deeply and paying a lot of attention to what is resonating and what's missing, and always constantly trying to iterate to improve the experience for activators so that we can continue to grow the community over time. So yes, the concept and the value of emergence is definitely one that we practice every day, and I think is really near and dear to me.
Yeah, and I actually love that you chose that one, because Rachel, our very first interview, one of her values was iterate often. So we've really come full circle, which was not planned, by the way, people, but just goes to show, that alignment piece is really strong in here today. So thank you so much, Jessy.